and welcome to By Design, a journey to discovering how culture influences the way people problem solve through the process of genuinely listening and learning each other's stories. On this episode, I'll be talking with Nick Sambrato, a second-generation Italian-American who was born in New York, transplanted in Florida, and was raised in a very Italian household. He is a serial entrepreneur that started his first business at the age of 13. Today, he is known best for being the founder of Mama Sauce, a gourmet letterpress, silk print, and hot foil print shop. Nick also helps inspire and educate people all over the United States through the Print Matters movement. In this episode, I'll be talking with Nick about his Italian-American upbringing and how it's influenced his entrepreneurial mind. He'll be sharing with us stories about his Italian family and the bromance that inspired the founding current company, Mama Sauce. Nick will also share us the stories behind the many failures that led to his current success. Nick, welcome to By Design.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, Heather. This is it's awesome to be able to talk about things that I find really important, like where we come from as people and who we are. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Of course. I'm so happy to have you. Well, okay. So I love that when I sent you the question of, tell me a little bit about yourself, you had so much to say. You're not just from one place. Can you talk a little bit about the loaded question of where are you from, Nick?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think we were just having this little conversation together, and I asked, I don't know, you were trying to describe where you're from and who you are, and you find yourself unable to commit to just one lane, not because you don't want to identify with it, but because you don't want to overlook everything else that's part of your story. And as you were describing that to me, I was like, man, it's so good to know that I'm not the only one, that every time someone goes, so where are you from? Where are you from? It's an instant, like, all right, where do I begin? Like I always answer it like, and people must not want to ask you that question anymore, because maybe it's like I'll always answer like, well, I don't know. Identity is a hard thing to really grasp, and then I'll just kind of talk about that. So answering where you're from, I don't like trying to. I don't know. I love it. I'm from New York. I was born in New York. You identify that way because you grew up in an Italian home, right? And there's certain people in your family that never stop believing they're still in New York in their mind, and you look at that, and so that's put on you, right? Dad who worships his ancestors. That's what my dad is. He's an ancestor worshiper, right? He's Italian. He's American. Those things are the first tier of his identity, which gets pushed on me, pushed on you from wherever you're from, right? And so on and so forth, how people identify and tell you who they are and where they're from. So every time someone asks where I'm from, it unpacks all that stuff, all these things that people, like, you grew up in a household that's insulated from everything else but Italian people, you grew up with a dad who says this, and other people in your family who still believe they're in New York, but we've been in Florida for a long time. So it's like a thread you pull open in your head where you're like, wait, I have to decide for myself, how to answer that, where are you from?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Am I a madman? But it's a tough thing. But yeah, those are parts of what I identify with. I've been in Florida for over 30 years. Of course, I'm Floridian,
Yeah.
I was born in New York, and for some reason you want to cling to that, My family's all from Italy before they got to New York, and you don't leave that out. So I'm from all those places, but I love it here in Orlando. I'm from Orlando, but I live in Winter Park, and I'm from there too. So yeah, I don't know. You don't have to choose a specific side. They all matter in your story.
I think it's a very good question, because at least for me, because it kind of gives me an opportunity to give somebody a little bit about myself. I'm like you. I was born in New York as well, but I didn't really live there. That was like my family's strategy of getting us to become United States citizens. And basically, they had papers, and they made sure that anytime they gave birth to any of us, they would have us in America. Right. But all of my uncles from my dad's side, they all lived in New York. And then from my mom, they all lived in Florida. So I had kind of like roots in different places. And but I'm originally, like, my ancestry is Palestinian. But we lived and grew up in Jordan because of, what happened, like Palestine is an occupied country, so we kind of had to like immigrate and move to Jordan. Actually, my parents were refugees in Jordan, and then they made their way to America. My grandpa, and he landed in New York, and New York to me is like everything. I love New York. Like you know, I didn't really live there for 1 year when I was 10 years old. I didn't like I still identify as a New Yorker. And when I was in Jordan, when people ask me, where are you from? Because, you know, I spoke really good English. I also had a New Yorker accent. So I always said I was a New Yorker, and then I moved to Florida, and it's hard to just say like I'm a Floridian now, and a New Yorker and a Jordanian and a Palestinian. So it's become, this question has become kind of an opportunity for me to start a conversation, not just give like an answer, it's the, you know, passing answer.
Oh, trust me. And I mean, what a great example of just you answering that question and feeling free to let that go, and say all of that. And when I was like talking about how complicated to answer that, it's weird because I answer it the way you do, in a very complicated way, but and I love that. You wonder if people think you're a weirdo, right? You know, because you're like answering in all the ways, because most people be like, I'm from New York, or I'll just choose a lane and say it so we can get this conversation over with. I'm from here. But when you let your freak flag fly a little bit and you just say, oh, you asked me a question. It's about me and my identity, my family. Let me just tell you, it's a moment to share a quick story, right? And there's all of these beats that just get more and more interesting. If you ask anybody where they're from, and this is the great thing about the question, and they truly answer it in all the ways that are complicating their identity, instantly you've got a really interesting conversation, right?
Yes.
I mean, like we could go in so many places from what you just answered, and I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it doesn't just become about like where you're from, but it becomes about the history of that place too, you know?
Sure.
And what's beautiful about it. And all of a sudden you're talking about your family, because you're just talking about your dad and him like having that proud Italian, you know, heritage that he's always proud of too. So let's get into that. So tell me a little bit about your Italian heritage. Tell me about, how did you guys come to America? What's the story behind that?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I grew up in a very Italian-American household. You know, my dad, who was born in Brooklyn, and both of his parents actually were born in the States. My mom, though, her mother was born in the States, her grandfather born in Italy, and her father was born in Italy. So half of my mom's siblings are from Italy, and another lot of them on the second half. She's got 13 brothers and sisters or something like that, and somewhere in Italy and some not. And so we had family there, and yeah, it's a kind of two different families where, you know, my dad's family, they all lived in Harlem in the same building. And when they moved out to Long Island, everyone lives on the same block. So when we moved to Florida, my cousins lived on the same block. We lived in the same block, grandma around the street. It's a very kind of like tight-knit family. You travel as a tribe. And so you find yourself where we ended up moving in Florida, which is a lot different in Orlando. We moved to this little town that just has this huge pocket of New York transplants. And it'd be very, very easy for us, and was, you know, like family comes over and you hang out here, you go to Paisanos, you get your food, you know, like it just stays like a little bubble of New York goes with you or whatever. It's just another iteration of that narrative. Like we're New Yorkers, we're Italians, we're Americans, you know, and forming that stuff. Yeah, so it gets real also complicated too, because things like, you know, how does language preserve? Like my mom speaks Italian, but, you know, never spoke it to us, right?
Yeah.
That assimilation, like kind of thing, as it moves forward and just become more American and more American, and certain traditions remain as you just, you know, assimilate, you know, and at this point I'm like peak assimilation, you know, like people would never believe I'm a full-blooded Italian American. It's like, I'm just American dude, you know?
Yeah.
It only takes a couple generations, but part of our family is still very steeped in that that narrative of still being very Italian, very American.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, because I think like I'm first generation Palestinian and Jordan American, and my kids, like I struggle with teaching them the language. Like I try to speak with Arabic as much as I can, but even when they speak Arabic back to me, like it's broken Arabic, and we struggle with how to maintain it, like how we want them to kind of learn more about the culture, learn more of the language, because first, being bilingual is always a good thing, right? And then holding on to the culture, because we think of ourselves as American and we came here for a better life, but we were never raised in a way that we're going to stay here for the rest of our lives. Always with the mentality, whenever Palestine is free, we're going to all move back to our country. And that's how we've all been raised, and we want to raise our kids with that hope as well. So I guess that's what's been kind of engraved in us. That's maybe a little bit different than you.
Yeah. And in another interesting layer of that is you have children in the dynamic, right? And now that I'm like, creeping up on 40, and you start thinking about that, these things start to run in my mind. And when people like you, parents, start talking about these things, that you have to consider with children in mind, and what inherited legacy you came with, and what inherited legacy you want to, betroth or, bequeath, or what, I don't know what the right word is, but so your child's inherited legacy, what do you hand them that you've unpacked, synthesized, and handed off that represents the past and a hope in something new in the future? And so just, wow, what a cool position to be in for you, to be able to actively define what, the interpretation of being a Palestinian American, Jordanian from New York looks like for your child.
Yeah.
And what they identify as. And then at a certain point, what I was thinking about last night, I spent a lot of great time with my friend last night who sculpted that really cool iguana up there out of wood. Really cool. He's just amazing. And so we're hanging out, and he's got a beautiful daughter I'm very close with, and we're talking about that stuff. And we were talking about that, like the idea of how much you can define what your child will identify and carry forward, but at a certain point you gotta let go. So it's like, and that, as far as Italian American, for me, coming back to the beginning of your question, that's one of the things that was really like, as an, my dad who, he comes from an era where, and legit, there was a time and a slice where Italians, when they got to New York, were looked at in a certain way, a certain type of laborer, and they felt like the lens was on them, along with some other groups as well, but nowhere nearly as bad as anyone. A lot of people had it, but my dad still like has this sense of vitriol about it, like that we're looked down upon as Italian. You're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, man. But like, I don't identify with that, but like, I've heard done some research and some stories like, oh, that was a little slice of time that he identified with, he saw in his father, and he cares for it, and it's something he tried to beat over my head, right? Yeah. Nikki, you're Italian, they don't like you because you're Italian, these are things I still hear. Yeah. And that's his part of it. That's not stuff that I experienced. I chose not to try to hear and say what your experience is, and now I'm going to try to define my experience about what you say it should be, but hear it, try to recognize you had an experience, and then mine's different. So yeah, Italians, like you're Italian, all that stuff. It was literally like, I don't know, culture trying to keep alive through the narrative of your parents, specifically my dad, and that Italianism, tribalism.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about, because when I first moved here in 2007, I mean, 9/11 was so fresh. And 9/11 to me was very traumatizing, because can you imagine being an American who's not living in America and seeing the pain and something that I identified with so close to my heart, and seeing that tragedy, and then having a finger pointed exactly like on you, like you did this, because I'm Middle Eastern or Arab or whatever. And like, whoa, like understand how I feel. Like, this is kind of like my home, because New York meant so much to me. It is part of my identity. So when I came to America, everybody was trying to tell me, especially because of my looks, like you can't really put a label on where I'm from, right? I look different. I look like I'm not from here, but you can't really say that I'm Middle Eastern or Arab unless I tell you so. So, for for the first maybe 5 years of me being here, maybe 6-7 years, I've always tried to keep that on the down low because I needed to protect myself, you know. And then I started to integrate to society and have my friends, and like I would tell them my story and they would accept me, and it was through storytelling. And I think this is why By Design was born, is to kind of give people the freedom to actually embrace who they are, where they're from, and not feel afraid that they're going to have like a label on them just because they're from somewhere. You know what I mean?
It's I've quoted, gosh, there's a filmmaker I really love, and I'm gonna misquote him and whatever, but Errol Morris, who makes documentaries, like I heard him in an interview where he was doing, and he called films a vehicle of empathy, stories a vehicle of empathy, and I can't help but think of that when you're talking about that. Stories are vehicles of empathy. Even going back to that question where someone says, "Oh, where are you from?" It may be it's small talk or formality, but the recipient who responds to it, if they unpack it the way you did, all of a sudden these stories are instant vehicles to empathy, and you have a menu where you can dive deeper. And it's just a matter of somebody, I don't know, telling a story, talking, taking, and it has a lot to do with what you know. I saw the slide, you know, on your YouTube channel where it's like talking about weird. It's like, okay, maybe you can embrace it. Maybe it is weird. Maybe it shouldn't be weird, but whatever, just feel free to be weird. If people think that's weird, that you would answer a question thoroughly and lay out your mind, right? That's absolutely fine. It's just like, let's not judge ourselves and to be like, cool. All right, let me show you my weird, because, you know, I'll admit it.
Exactly, because your weird is just normal to you. Just people can't relate to it because they haven't experienced it, right? So it's just sharing. Embrace your weird, share your uniqueness. But let's go into learning a little bit more about your childhood. Can you talk a little bit about your upbringing in traditional Italian home? What was that like?
My mom really carried forward a lot of the home traditions or the domestic traditions that you would assume like it would be in a movie of an Italian American home, right? My mom doesn't speak in a broken accent though, but she, you know, but like she made sauce every Sunday, you know. We have old people speaking Italian at the table every night after dinner, while the kids romped around. They drank espresso and sambuca and speaking Italian, eating cookies, and it's just a very familial thing. The cultural part of what I identify in my experience being Italian American was that very centered around the kitchen, very centered around the table. The women really bouncing back and forth, like my mom, like just super hosting. And I see it in myself when people are like, I can't sit down. No, I'm not gonna eat. I got to serve people. I got to take care of them. You know, like this thing. And that's, I noticed there's a common thread that's mothers, right, in general, and then you see it manifest in these like Latin-based mothers or Eastern European, like they all have the same gene. Mothers have the same gene where you need to be fed, you need to be taken care of. My mom just did that with pasta and sauce and meatballs and everything else. Always antipasta, you know, before dinner. And it was just a big family thing, you know. So Sundays, you know, you ate at 3, and people came over. It's a house that has a constant rotating cast of. That's why Seinfeld feels so familiar, you know, like you're like there's a gang of people and then a whole bunch of B-roll characters that kind of cycle through, right? And that's a cool experience. That's the kind of experience I felt like I grew up having. The home has a center place, and that's the kitchen, and people come and get fed and they hang out, and you just rap and talk crap all night, you know. Sit at the table. There's the kids' table. Every now and then, the lone kid that hangs. I was that kid that hung out with, you know, at the table with the old people, take a sip of espresso, you know. So it was that was my thing, and Catholicism, being an altar boy, all that rolled into there as well. So definitely family, you know, mass, that whole thing was my experience, and I feel so grateful to have had it. And now, you know, you do your own thing and do your own life. And I'm at that point where like, I long for some of the things that maybe I didn't carry forward. So I want to reconnect with them, or how am I going to interpret them? when I left for college, for undergrad, my mom wrote every one of her recipes in a composition book and gave it to me. That was her gift to
No
me. It's like, I can't
way.
cook for you here, right? So that's something we've been working on laying out. I'm going to do a book of at some point, just for fun, just to put a little book of my mom's recipes. This stuff I grew up on. I'm just going to make it just to make it. There's no way it'll ever make money. It's just like a thing that, we've been illustrating and laying out, and it's just going to be a personal thing. So yeah, so it's had a profound effect on me, that Italian household, that familial thing to grow up, and I see it manifesting in different ways, and it defined a lot of things for me. And I've ran through my own filter. Like, it went from, Nikki, you got to have a son named Nick, and you got to marry a nice Italian girl, nothing else but Italian girl,
Yeah.
that didn't happen. I haven't had a son yet, and maybe I would name him Nick, right? My dad's Nick, Nicola. There's a whole slew of Nicholas Sambratos. But I found that when it came to my partner, my woman, she had to. It just never ever worked until I found someone that was distinctly from your like a different background. She was. I mean, trust me, I'm as like American as can be, but I come from this place that wasn't far removed from a different culture. It was its own culture in a bubble. And it wasn't, I met Lydia, who's, very, very, her parents are both immigrants.
Yeah.
And it felt like I was at home. I've spent, since I left, and that's the cool thing about leaving. God, go away from your bubble at some point, that prodigal son story, go do that. Go. When I left for school, and I stayed at home for 2 more years at home, and then I left my second 2 years of school. And I remember when I was a kid, the first time my mom let me, oh my God, protective moms. Italians are protective moms, fierce moms. She let me stay the night at a friend's house, and I vividly remember being in their kitchen and being like, what is she making? And she's like, frying up, I remember she cut big chunks of green peppers and big chunks of onion, and poured a thing of ragu in a pan. She goes, it's not going to be like, and then put like beef in there or whatever, and then pour ragu. And she's like, it's not going to be like your mom's Italian cooking. I'm making Italian for you. And I was like, what are these people eating? Like, the food, it really, it was a culture shock. I was like, to be in a white Anglo-Saxon home is different than being in an Italian home. So I went away to school, getting out of my comfort zone. Your mom lets you leave the bubble. It all is really, really, I feel like now I'm not like uncomfortable. I'm one of these people, but it makes you realize that you have your own bubble in your family if you're in that home for a long time. So it's something to juxtapose against things. It's something to shape you, and it's something that I want to carry forward in my own weird ways.
That's amazing that you say that, because I didn't really kind of feel the importance of my culture. And because I come from a small little village that's like 5,000 people in Palestine. And this village has its own little unique culture, that's, if you travel to the nearby little village, completely different. And growing up in Jordan, I knew I was different, but I didn't really think much of it until I came to the US. And then I was like, oh my God, my culture. I want to tell people about the beautiful things that we do. And then I start to talk to everyone about it. And then I start learning more about them. And I'm just like, oh my God, there's these little dots on the map that have a beautiful, colorful culture that not everybody understands or knows about. And then I just kind of spread that message to the world. So you're right. When you talk about living in that little bubble, you won't appreciate what you have until you lose it, right? So, once you get out, then you feel like it's so important. Yes, okay, I wanted to get out, but it's still part of who I am, and let it be its own little bubble, right?
Yeah. Then you can make it your own, and then move it through the universe the way that you passes through you. Yeah, make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. I love that. So let me ask you this. Did you ever travel to Italy?
Yeah. I've been there a pretty decent amount of times. Mostly since I was an adult. We started going when I was in my 20s. Getting to Italy was always gonna happen, you know. I mean, not by my volition. Like my mom is just an incredible force of a human being.
Wow.
Just an absolute force, who survived and suffered, and then grew and thrived and raised and reared and gave us so much more than we ever could have imagined, from nothing, from absolutely nothing, and downtrodden and beaten, abused along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the inherited legacy, right, the home she built for us in that familial sense was not something that she didn't come from an environment like that, but it had the trappings of it, the cultural trappings, but didn't have the heart and the love. They went through the motions, they made the meals, and then you were abused and beaten and neglected. So she took all that was beautiful from her culture and moved it forward and did those things. Sorry, I got carried away talking about my mom there for a second. So
no, I bet you she's gonna love it. Hopefully, if she watches this.
She probably will. She probably sneaks and watches everything I do. Which is
typical
I try
mom.
to tell, typical mom. So, like I said, he had to go to Italy, and it's such part of our identity. And my mom came from this thing where, man, I'm trying to tell you how the Italianism manifested in her. She brought it back to the family, brought it back to home. She really came from nothing. I'm talking from like just. I'll spare you. Just know that she had a terrible time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she's a force. And so as she came out of that, Triumph did more things. She manifested these things that were real in her, the things that she always wanted, right? Mm-hmm. The tinged aspects of family, the cooking around the table. Families, sometimes you stay together in really hard times and whatever they're going through, but you stay together because it's a pack mentality that could be really broken and scorned and hurtful, but you still go through the motions. And so maybe that's where she came from, I don't know. But it all, when she put it back together for herself and it filtered everything in her experience and her culture through it, and then she defined it for herself, it was eventually going to be a house with columns and Roman statues, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
She built this little home, you know, out of nothing, eventually did it and built a home that looked like you were sitting in Rome, like a tiny little slice of Rome. It's like, oh, you see it now as symbolic for me to be like, you know, of course, that's the little statue she would build as an edifice to, you know, a triumph, a life of triumph from nothing, as it's defined, because that's peak Rome, that's peak Italian. That's, you know, there was paintings of on the ceiling, you know, like, and it was just like this little tiny, but it's, again, a little tiny slice of stuff. And so if that all roads for her pointed to a little Italian castle to bring in the family when she could to Italy. And I've been back many times since. And so it was a must, it was a have to. It's almost like by doing that, by making this little town, like it's almost like everything peaks and you attain all that stuff. And then, you know, I don't know, it's not a thing anymore. Now we can go to, when we go, we'll enjoy it, but it's not like,
it's not the same.
It's not the same. That castle's gone. The family's changed, right? The life goes on, and then you learn and you adopt it. And it's almost like culturally, I feel like we're less Italian in a way, because not every, you know, we don't have 50 people. Even when life was really, really hard for my family, and we're still 50 people at every holiday, Easter, Christmas, right? You find a way, everyone at 50 people, your whole family is there. That doesn't, you know, I don't know, that stuff doesn't exist quite as much anymore, which is sad. That's a personal journey, but those cultural things are really cool. So it had to happen. We you know, when we got to Italy, it felt like cathartic and awesome and cool. And I don't know. Yeah, I got a chance. I traveled to Italy for like a month on a scooter. That was really cool. But I don't know what to do there because they never taught us Italian, right? My mom never taught us that. So what about, you know? So it's, in one part, it feels really familiar at home because you have that culture and love and the upbringing, and the food's very, very similar, and the language is familiar. I can understand a bit of it, you know, and it's Latin based, so it's not terribly a huge culture shock. But there's still some of that because you're still an American, even though you're Italian American. right? And then on the other side, it feels a little homey because like it's worshipped. Like your homeland is worshipped if your culture, culture.
Yeah,
It
definitely.
is. Yeah, it just is. So I don't know, but there's some kind of identity that's still rooted there. No matter, I'm very far away from it. I don't hope people think that like I think I'm like King Italian. I'm not. I'm like generations back now. But how long does it take to breed that out of you? That sense of ancestor worship, that sense of homeland worship. You know, like I go to bat for it still. Like Italy's the most beautiful place I've ever been. You know, you're like, no, I don't know. Palestine's probably gorgeous too. But it has a great deal to do with identity and the stories that people tell you from your family and how they boil it down and build edifices to it and everything else. And yeah, I love it. I can't wait to go back.
That's beautiful. So let's trace back. I see how passionate you are about, Italy and your first time there. Can you talk a little bit about, how you felt the first time you were there? Did you guys go visit, like, are you guys from Rome? Where is your family from exactly in Italy? And how was the experience? Maybe do you have family who still lives there? Talk to me a little bit about maybe what kind of culture shock you experienced. Just expand a little bit about how was your first visit there?
Yeah, sure. First time going there, again, I think it felt weirdly familiar. Almost, and you see so much and hear so much about it, and then your family, you get there, and it's almost like you're like, of course, it had to be like this. And culturally, you get there, and you also realize you're like, oh, I'm a different thing. I'm an American who's of a background Italian. So there's this. You got to get real for a second, like put respect on Italy's name. That's them. This is me. Like I'm American, it helps define quite a bit. So I don't take those kind of things personally. So I thought it was a beautiful thing that helped really it helped define my identity more. I'm like, okay, this is another place. It's not home for me. Right. If I wanted to go and get a dual citizenship because my grandfather's there, is it possible? Yeah. But I mean, what am I doing? Like my identity, my home is there. So it helps define it that way. Culturally, though, it's just maybe I feel like everyone should resonate with that life, like 2 o'clock siestas, gelato hanging out in the square. I mean, come on, these things are awesome. So it just feels like the way it should be. And we had a little talk about identity in Florida a little while ago, and it's so weird because when I left my home, my little bubble home, I went to St. Augustine, which is like a little village, a little European village, and it feels like really small and familial. And I left there, and I just got here in Winter Park, like this, there's not many more places for me to go in Florida where I could feel like I'm in a little tiny European town, right? There's not too many places left, so I don't know where else I would go. But there's just that, I don't know. That's what a home feels like. For me, in my experience, an Italian home felt like that. It felt like a little village, and because you all live on the same block, and so that definitely defined connecting to Italy, connecting to that feeling when you see that. That gave me a manifestation that was starkly different than the city I grew up in, but it gave me something to lay my family experience on a physical landscape, and then say, there. I'm finding a town like that, and I'm going to live in a town like that, and that's what I feel like why I love where I live so much.
Oh my God, I love Winter Park. You are absolutely right. It's definitely kind of like a small little village of its own,
Yeah.
I lived in Orlando next to UCF, so everything there was new construction, and it felt more like UCF. Woo woo. You can finish. And I lived in a neighborhood that was like cookie cutter. And I am not used to that. I'm so used to like different shaped houses, and I travel from house to house, sometimes on rooftops and stuff like that. So for me, when I saw Winter Park, I fell in love with it too. And when we were discussing, my husband and I, like if we were going to stay in Florida, that was definitely where we wanted to live. But then we came to California and San
Came over.
Diego. So much character in the weather. Like that's what they call it in America. Like, I'm looking for a house that has character. And
Yeah.
like that's exactly what it means,
Can I ask
So
you a question about that? Moving to San Diego, and
sure.
I mean, because you've moved a bit, right? And you had an
Mhm.
experience that in Orlando is different. When you go there, how did you experience, like, even to sample before you move there, or when you're looking, how did you
Mhm.
try to experience the city to get a feel for what it had to offer culturally? Like, do you do anything like? Do you
Yeah,
try
I
to experience
understand.
the city through that lens at all?
So, the way we did it was we kind of figured out that we're gonna come here because of work before we came here, and we had to make a decision: is it worth us leaving our family? Because family is where the home is, right? And basically, we would come here. We visited a few times, and each visit was us experiencing something new. So we visited all the different spots, anything that appeals to us. And then when I moved here, I made sure to integrate into the design community because that was very important to me. The design community in Orlando was such an essential part of my life that I was craving that. And when I came here, I got in touch with AIGA, Creative Mornings, and I needed something that reminded me of home, and that's basically what was it for me. But what you realize when you to San Diego, at least, is the age difference. That people that live here, when I moved here, I happened to be pregnant, and then all of a sudden, I noticed that everybody is pregnant here. Like they're all young, they're all in their 30s. It feels like, they're all young couples starting families, and it just felt perfect for me. Living next to UCF, it was either, college life or people that are retired. I didn't really see that many couples that were around our age. So that was really important to us because even though my culture, having couple friends not as essential, but for me it was very important because I value having friendships that are from different cultures, not just sticking to the Middle Eastern Arab bubble. I have an opportunity living in America to kind of like get to know people from around the world. So why limit myself? So that was my experience, but it could be different for you. I definitely would recommend you visiting a few times because it is pricey.
Yeah, it is, and it's also awesome. It's really a great city. That's funny that because I was tactically when you say like you value having friends from different cultures, is that more of a open mindset where you're like, I've got no borders, and so I consciously think about that and meditate on that? It's like, hey, like whoever you are, you can be my friend, or is it more like you're like, I'm going to make an effort to seek out a more diverse group of people?
I happen to stumble upon people who are just as weird as me. I don't know how it happens. I think because I am not afraid of no longer afraid because I was being judged. I have fully embraced who I am. So whenever I come and I approach you, I'm very gutsy. So I will ask difficult questions that are questions that were normal at one point, but are now, because of social media and because of people being so connected all the time, it's not normal to be in an elevator with somebody and be like, so how's your day? Where are you from? What you doing? Where are you going? What do you work as? Like it's not normal in that few seconds you're in an elevator to say stuff like that. But I do. I try my best. Anytime I see somebody, I try to say a positive comment. I go out of my way to really get to know you. So, for example, at my new job, I have already had one-on-one lunches with most of everyone on my team because I think it was very important for me to kind of get to know each person at a personal level, not just as a teammate. So I think it's just me being really weird. Yeah. So I just stumble upon people, just find them. You never know what you would see. Like, I would notice I went to the AIGA conference a few weeks back. there was a girl, we were having, coffee, we stood on the table, and she was wearing this really beautiful, intricate bracelet, and it looked like real gold. And I know what real gold looks like because that's part of our traditions and cultures when you get married. And so I looked at her and I was like, that's beautiful. Oh my God, where'd you get that from? She looked like a typical white girl, right? I don't know what that is, but in my perception of what a typical white girl, that's what she looked like to me.
There's typical white girls, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was like, my best friend just got married in India, and that was some of the stuff that they gave out during the wedding, and it's not real. I'm like, yeah, because that looks really expensive. But we started talking. She all of a sudden, I found out that she studied under Debbie Millman in New York, and she's living in San Francisco now. And all of a sudden we just delved into all this personal conversation. I started talking to her about having a kid and having boyfriends, or should I stay with my boyfriend or should I not? You never know what you're talking about. But the fact that I'm not afraid of personal and talking about myself, it allows other people to do the same, right? And you never know what people are willing to share until you make them feel comfortable to share those things.
You got it. And making people comfortable to share those things means, in a big part, being comfortable in yourself or with yourself. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said you stopped judging or being afraid of being judged, right?
Yeah.
What a terrible, I'm not judging that, because I went through a lot of my life like that, feeling worried about being judged, and that's imposed on you in a lot of different ways. But what an awful way to move through the universe, to always worry about what people are going to think. You got to actually have intentions and be cautious and respectful and loving and kind and treat people in that way. But besides that, just let go, and just be you. You say be weird. Cool. Do it. You know? Yeah. And it's all linked to that judgment thing. I
agree. And I found the purpose of buying is to teach people how to listen positively. Listen positively. Don't listen with the intention of I'm going to defend myself. You are going to say something wrong that's going to offend me, and I want to defend myself. Just listen and just let the person feel free to speak their mind. And even if they say something that's politically incorrect, just listen. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Tell yourself that they didn't mean it with that intention, unless they specifically say it to your face. And I think once you do that, all of a sudden you become a better person, and you become more accepting of people. Because I find myself always saying things that are politically incorrect, and a lot of times, I try to either let it go or just let them know, forgive me if I, offended you in any way. Because just watching the news and stuff like that, it's very, very concerning to see how people interact with one another and how they're always offended or upset or whatever. Which I'm not saying nobody has the right to be offended. Yes, you do have right, but I think you would be a happier person if you just let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really well put.
Yeah.
It's take nothing personally, and even for the people who can't do that, who take things personally, then all of a sudden it gets real tempting to take it personally, that people are taking things personally, getting offended at being offended. It gets real meta. But you're 100% right. You gotta just let it go and be cool. So many things that we get really, again, people have a right to be offended, and people can do things and say things that legitimately hurt. And you could never just brush off with, I'm not taking it personally. But man, there's a lot in the world you can just be like, you know what? I'm not going to take that personally. That's totally cool. Do your thing, yeah. And give people the benefit of the doubt. It's true.
Let's get back to learning a little bit more about you. No more about Yes. When did you realize you were weird or different growing up?
At the adults table as a kid, hang out I'd hang out with the old people, the older people, and just talk to them and hang out. And it struck me like an old person called me. They're like, "Oh, you're worldly. You're like quite worldly." And the way, I don't know, there's something about, like, I was like, wait. It kind of struck me. I was like, so I was having this conversation. The person was surprised I was having a conversation with them. They said whatever that was, and then I was like, I realized, like, well, he's just reacting to, like, the fact that I hang out with old people all the time, and he's shocked that we are just having a conversation, with like a kid, like 9 or 8 or whatever I was. And then I realized, like, oh shit, you hang out with old people, like you're kind of like, like on, any given night, you're just sitting at the table with a bunch of old people, and your parents' friends, and like
better
like,
conversation.
That's kind of, I think, maybe, but I was like, that's a bit weird, man. I'm kind of a weird kid, like all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't go out. And I'm not interested in a lot of things that my friends are interested in. Like, I just like being here, hanging out at the house with these old folks, shooting the shit, whatever. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was maybe around there when I started to become more self-conscious of my active weirdness, like like hanging out with older people, or whatever, like into being at the adults table. Mm-hmm. And then you go down that slippery slide of thinking you're the only weird person and self-judgment, and then the world turned on you and everyone had flipping their insecurities on you, and next thing you know, all you're doing is living in a perpetual state of hating yourself, or you're weird because you're weird, or worrying about letting your weird out. And then at a certain point, hopefully, if we're lucky, we just say, all right, just who cares, and just embrace it and do it. Yeah.
That's
so I've
awesome.
Probably always known I was weird.
But there's nothing bad about being weird. Being weird is actually pretty cool.
I've probably always known I was weird, and I didn't always know what you just said, right? And that's the hard part. You got to reconcile those things. Mm-hmm. As soon as you can realize it's okay just to be who you are, the better. The sooner, the better. Just let that catch up, Yeah. Yes, I'm weird. Yes, that's okay. Cool.
So hanging out with all those old people, is there any customs that have been passed down to you by the older generation that you can share with us?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm not the typical old Italian guy that hung around, the house, like with suspenders and a wife beater, and like would sit there and just get served. That's not my vibe. Like culturally, like in that thing, like I think I mentioned it before, like feeding people, feeding people, serving people. That's something that you realize gave my parents, maybe your parents, my mom, great life, and it's compulsive. Like she has to do it. Like when I was in school, she'd come and she'd come visit, and like 40 broke kids would come over the house because my mom was coming. She was going to cook a big Italian dinner for everybody on Sunday, and that's found its way into my life. And like, I realized that like just compulsive. If you're over on, and this is why Lydia and I work so well together. She just loves to feed people. And I do too. And it's weaved its way, into me finding my niche in the kitchen alongside of her, how I'm starting to express the cultural dishes and how I want to express those from my heritage and the habits, all through that cultural thing of just, let's feed people, let's create a table, let's create a home, right? And it's extended into the yards, like that's all I do is work on the food we grow and they cook this stuff, it's like, not all I do because you got to work too, but it's
But I've noticed that because I've seen some fruits in your backyard that I miss. Oh my God, there's some fruits in your backyard. You guys need to check his Instagram account, okay? Because you post on there often about, like, I think in your stories more than your actual feed. But I love everything that you have in the backyard, and I want to figure out a way to grow it in my little balcony, because those fruits, at least I haven't seen them in the shops, so
yeah.
I see how that
I like growing weird tropical fruits. Yeah. I got a lot of strange tropical fruits. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a different expression. Well, actually, I mean, the old people, like yeah, my grandparents, my dad, you know, like and he grew up, they always had a farm, you know. My dad, when I was, like, he always at his house, always had chickens, always had pigeons, quite often would have rabbits or goat,
Yeah.
you know, always doing that. There's always a little garden, you know. That's like when we visit Pina, my cousin Pina in Montreal, who doesn't speak a word of English, God bless her, and she's amazing. You
You
know,
speak
and
French?
Italian and French, yeah,
Italian French.
Italian and French, and she's got this wonderful garden, and you're like, it's I don't know, I love those things because they're like they represent something that this connection that if you can connect to the earth, you know, eventually you can connect to the idea that we're all connected. You know, if you could feed people, right? Well, some of the most like greatest reminders that people are good is like when I've been like on a road trip for a couple months with a buddy and meeting people, and they take you into their home, or traveling in Europe and people take you and they feed you, you know, and I try, you know, that's one of the biggest cultural manifestations I'll carry forward. Like you just feed people. Yeah.
I think this has been an interesting discovery that every single person that I've spoken to on this video podcast has mentioned food in some way or form, and how that was a way of saying their culture too. So it's interesting that you also mention it, because I've always known Italian food. I mean, come on, you know, we know that it's such a staple in the food industry, you know, having Italian food, you know, as part of like American food, Middle Eastern, you know. But when you start talking to other peoples from smaller cultures, you realize that food is actually what brings people together. I mean, we've all known that, but it not literally just brings people together on the table. It brings people together from around the world. And I think that's very, very interesting that you mentioned that. Hello?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I
you,
thought I lost
you had
you
a
for a
little, you did, for a second I lost you. Yeah, I don't know how you get around it. Yeah, I mean, it's such a visible, tangible, shareable symbol of any culture that it's exchangeable, like currency of, you know, of,
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're very passionate. I can tell the way you talked about your mom. I've always known that you're passionate since the first day I met you, which was when I first went to the GDSA's meeting it was like a speech that you had about your journey and opening Mama Sauce and on all of that. And that was my first talk ever in design school. And for some reason, it resonated with me so much because of the passion that you kind of present forward. And it is very evident in everything that you do, whether it's opening up fiction or opening up Mama Sauce. And it's part of your, you know, your personality and being an entrepreneur. So can you tell us a little bit about how did you become an entrepreneur, and explain your journey into now having Mama Sauce?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as quick as I could tell it, you know, I was a weird little computer kid for a little while there. And I was the kind of guy that built little computers, built PCs, you know, and I started running like a bulletin board, which, you know, is like that thing you would dial up with your computer because you saw a phone number on a bulletin board and said, oh, we can get on there. And so you'd log into other people's computers instead of just ubiquitously always being on the internet like we are. You would have to like dial up someone's computer, like Nick's computer, you know, ding, 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 doo, 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 that whole thing. And so I ran a little bulletin board, and that was a way I started making a little bit of money. People would mail me checks, you know, like to you know, install new games or to install new, you know, things that people could log into your computer and do. And it was just a really cool thing. I remember the first check I got it was like, I mean, I would be stoked right now if I opened up the mail and got a $385 check. As a 37-year-old man, I would be so stoked.
Yeah,
right now.
Totally.
Right? I was 13 and I got a check for like 380 something bucks. My mind was blown. My mind was absolutely blown. That was more money that could come. I was like, what did I just have my confirmation? you know, like, holy cow. That's the only time you really get the money, you know, it's like Italian Catholic kid, like every, write a passage here, sacrament of the saints, and money makes it money. You know, it's my first big payday since that. And so that kind of really addicted me to the idea of doing my own thing.
Nick, can you favor? Can you pause your mic and then relaunch it again? I think there was.
Oh, my mic went out?
Okay, no, there you go. You're talking fine. It just got a little funky.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's amazing. You were 13 when that was your first experience at entrepreneurship.
Yeah. I would like write this, the experience, have a bulletin board, do all that. And then eventually I sold toys online, and me and my buddy George had the first wholesale account for the Star Wars lightsabers. Like we had them like 6 months before they're in Walmart before Phantom Menace. And we were like, we couldn't sell them fast enough online. So that was crazy. And then I started a record label, and that did mostly due to my business partner, who was amazing. That did really well, and we were able to sell that granted, like, don't think these are all the things. I mean, I was doing roofs or helping you doing handyman stuff or managing properties or working at the Apple store, serving at this restaurant. I was maintaining jobs. I was hustling. Yeah. Always. Yeah. So, I mean, the amount of hats and amount of, Joe name tags I've had, it's like, it's crazy. So, but I always had my own thing going, running a little business, and they always seem to reshape and change and become a little more legitimate every time, until it was actually like, from just me in my bedroom to like, oh, we got an intern, or me and a partner, and kind of evolved, and they all funnily interlink. And if there was no record label, there'd be Mama Sauce, and so they were all necessary in the journey. And somehow, because I was working in music and needed to print stuff for bands, I ended up getting into printing for bands. And then that turned into a love affair with not like digital printing, but like when I found that world of, specifically making art prints for bands and touring posters, and for me, it was mostly the process, right? Because I was steeped in the process and seeing how this stuff worked, and the physicality of it, and the problem solving of it, and the challenge of it. And that started out the 10-year, like, just, I don't know, just infinitely fascinated with printmaking. It's just a beautiful thing. And the fact that it's just the people that want to do it still trying to give a place for them to do it, it's cool. I dig it.
And I guess from what you're saying is there had to be multiple failures before you even became successful. And you've had small successes that led to one big success. And you're still on the journey. I mean, there's so much more room for Mama Sauce and everything that you're doing to grow even further. So I think it's a great lesson for people to kind of know that nothing comes easy, and you have to work, and you have to hustle, and you have to have a side job and a second and a third and a fourth, while you're pursuing what you're passionate about. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Like Mama Sauce is approaching its 10th birthday. Share with us the founding story of Mama Sauce.
Yeah, sure. We're about to be 10. There are a lot of failures. There's a lot of sleepless nights in our story. There's a lot of everything in everybody's story. But yeah, I mean, to tell it as fast as I can, because I'll spend an hour on it. Just, all those things, all those aforementioned things, right, that led into each other, turned into this digital print shop that my buddy Joey was working part-time at, but we just assumed we bought to work, to do printing for these labels. And then my buddy Austin, who's a designer, who also printed gig posters and t-shirts in his garage, kind of guy, who's real DIY, great designer. He wanted to get rid of his screen printing and stuff because he wanted to go on a little bit of a walkabout. And so at the time he was an acquaintance, and so we moved into this house next door to my house. We got his screen printing equipment and mixed it with them. We only had a laser printer, so we didn't really know what printing was. We knew what a laser printer was, and we just spit out 11 719 posters for bands and CD covers for bands or whatever, short run stuff. And then when we met Austin, and he spent 2 weeks like showing us how to really print things, informing us about design, telling us about his design hero, showing us his process. It was just a whole other level, right? We met a designer, and that designer changed our life. That designer showed us handmade. That designer introduced us to equipment, and we spent 2 weeks together, really trying to learn what would take us ultimately years, but 2 weeks of the jumpstart with Joey Bordenga, Nick Sambrato, Austin Petito, 3 Italian-American guys under one roof for extended hours every single day, learning a craft, mixing inks in a kitchen. You know, of course it would have to be Mama Sauce. It just had to be. It had to be Mama Sauce, and that's what we called it.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a beautiful story. And I remember you telling it for the first time, and I was mind blown because, like, I don't know, how did your mom react when you told her?
My mom, she heard one thing I said once about, working with your hands, and like reminds me of, my grandfather and blah, blah, blah. And now she has trouble believing that this has anything to do with her, because I had talked, she, I don't know, I think she knows that it's an homage to her cooking, the wholesome feeling, the ingredients, the feeling we want to impart on designers. The fact that when I go home, if I wake up at Sunday morning and I smell, brown and garlic, like I know I'm home, that feeling, everything about it. I know she knows that's what I'm trying to convey. But for some reason, she won't, I don't know. She won't. She won't
Mama
ever let me live
this
down.
is for you.
Yeah, she won't ever believe it. Yeah, it is. Really is. All those things, and we fail at it. Like you said, you fail a million times. You never stop failing. But at the end of the day, we really do try our hardest, like your mom would try, just to do the best by you as we possibly can. If you're choosing to give us your money, if you're choosing to trust us, if you're choosing to enter a relationship, we are trying so damn hard, and we really, really are. And your parents are too, and they're not going to be perfect. And you gotta love them anyway, because they're your parents and they're living their lives for you. And so that metaphor, like, I feel like that's real. I feel like we are everyone's mom. Like, we're like, we just want you to be happy. We just want you to be happy. When you give us your designs, we just want you to be happy. Yeah, in a lot of ways, like that's kind of one of our value systems. We really kill ourselves, and we're not perfect, and it's hard to do this at scale. It's hard to do it for a lot of people, but that's the passion. Mama Sauce is a lot of people with that mama passion.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I can totally see that just by visiting Mama Sauce. I visited a few times, and what I love about Mama Sauce and what you guys created is literally, it does feel like the kitchen of Orlando. That's where everybody gets together. That's where, you open your services to, and your facilities to students, to design students, to anyone who's interested to learning about printing. And what's unique about Mama Sauce is that you guys do spot printing, and you actually mix and try to make it identical to the Pantone, correct?
Yeah,
you're better at explaining that, but and I just wanted to ask you, like, how did you get into being involved in the print matter movement, and why is designing for print so important in this digital world?
Well, the print matters thing is Brian French, a French paper, and myself, and he comes from a wonderful family that have had a paper company, a paper mill, for over 150 years. It's the oldest operating business in the state of Michigan. It's older than Ford. It's just an old, steeped in history, family-owned place, and they love paper, and they are amazing people, and they support the design industry, and we're much younger than them. We're 10, but we're in a lot of ways in the same place. We owe a lot to designers, and we try to serve the design industry. Brian, who's Brian French paper, and I were at a conference together, and we're like, man, I wonder if people, which is we're talking about, we wonder if people would be crazy enough to come out and hear us talk about the importance of paper and printing and the intersection of that and design. And so we just started doing it, you know, and gosh, I don't know how many places we've been, but in the last 2 years, I mean, we've been all over, and people, I'm just floored that people like want to just hear this. It's like the story of you. How do you identify? Who are you? You know, like that's what we do. We come up and we say, this is us. This is our story. This is our people. This is our process. This is what we do, and this is why we think it matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because, you know, X, Y, and Z. And so, yeah, we try to tell and give an experience at the same time of just what all goes into a story of a brand, of a company that's just here to make things so you all can make things as designers. And we're just here to support you all. And here's our story. It's just a vehicle of empathy. We just want to open up the windows, you know, and say, hey, check out what's going on here, and check out the hustle and the story. It's just a great way to get to know each other, right? It's just like saying, like, tell me about you, and we go up there and we tell you about us. And yeah, I think the second part of your question was, why does, you know, paper and printing matter, right? I would submit that more than paper and print, it's like, I mean, you think, you know, you do this podcast because people's stories matter, right? Mm-hmm. We just feel that paper and print in combination with design are just such beautifully mature, vested, fertile areas for people who like to tell stories, to have another media to tell story that gets a little more dimensional, or another dimension, right? The fact that you could borrow from 550 years of letterpress history and bake that unique process that's fully peaked and matured, and utilize it in a way to tell a story in a piece that you thought about that dimension and the physical dimension of this thing that you're going to hand somebody, that's on this piece of paper that has these physical characteristics in this color, that comes with this history of this story of this family that was made in this way, tells a very multi-dimensional story that you thought through so many things. And it's not to say it's any better than doing UI or UX. It's not to say it's any better than any other like in-person communication. It's just saying there's a media out here. There are media out here. There's a medium here that that's beautiful and viable and in good hands with us and many other people. And don't forget about it. Use it and tell your story with our stories in combination, or tell your story with just these media as well. So, you know, it's not like we believe paper and print are going away, but we're very much in the business of infecting people with a passion for it like we have. So, you know, there'll be a small little contingent of people that always carry the torch, being like, look at this printed thing, isn't it beautiful? Because it is. You know, the communication revolution, you know, Gutenberg, paper, these things, they're just such they're just a huge part of our history as humans. I don't know. It's just awesome. It's just, as long as we always have this little window to do what we do, I'll be happy, and not trying to take back over anything. We're just telling stories about this stuff.
I think what people forget about printing on paper is the fact that when you get something like, you know, my designs back here, they're printed on French paper as well, and they're by DKNG, and mm-hmm. What you don't realize is that having this and holding it feels like I have a piece of that person. And, you know, me, that's why print matters. You know, when you create a design and you just post it on the digital screen, you can't grasp that, right? But once you have it physically in your hand, and then you can display it, whether it's in your office or in your room, or I don't know, put it in your drawer even, you just feel like you have a piece of that person. And mm-hmm. when you see the texture and all the love that went into making that, all of a sudden you think you start to understand this person. Like, okay, so this was the thought process behind, you know, why was this embossed and everything else was not, or whatever. All of a sudden you're thinking, if you feel like having a conversation with of art that was created by somebody. And for me, that's why print matters. And you're welcome to use that in any of your presentations.
I'll screen cap that whole thing. DKNG is a great example too, because you have that one story, like you said, when you see this piece and they emboss it, all this stuff, it has its own story. But DK&G is another level too, because they give you a peek on the content side. You could go, if you know what went into that poster that's behind you, not just on design, and they'll put together this video that shows how much they put into design and then how much goes into the print. When you know that to make that poster, which probably 200 or 250 of them were made only, the amount of work that went into just to make those 250 pieces, from the thought to the design to the print and the paper to everything, it's like, my God, we're living in amazing times that we could do these things with UI and UX and everything else, but we could also make 250 of this beautiful thing just to make 250 of this beautiful thing. It's just really cool. It's just really, really cool.
I love that. Okay, so what advice do you have for young creatives launching the first entrepreneurial venture?
Oh man, you gotta hustle. You gotta live it. You gotta live your Dharma to the T. I can't tell you what your Dharma is and what it's gotta be, except for very few areas. There's only a few things that are 100, everyone's gotta do. You gotta treat people well. You gotta treat people very well. You got to do right by people. When you screw up or do wrong, you got to admit it and you got to make it right. You got to set great expectations in order to be able to do these things. You're going to screw up. And even when you're great at what you do, you're going to screw up. You got to forgive yourself, and you got to act in a way where you can be forgiven, right? When you screw up. Aside from that, I just don't know any example of any business anywhere, unless you are a venture capitalist and you're disconnected from the heart of the business and you're just investing in things, right? But even then, you're invested in that business. It's going to be a part of you. If you're going to do this, it's going to be a part of you, and you're going to be a part of it, and it's going to need so much of you. It's going to need so much of you, and that's a slippery slope. It's a really slippery slope. To make something, to give it life that maybe will give other people life, or be a part of people's their income or whatever. You're providing jobs or whatever. Like you're creating something. Whenever you make a business, you're making something, putting in the universe, and just make sure you have good values in it, and know that it's going to take way longer than you think, and it's going to be a lot more work than what you think. Yeah, I think that's everything I'd probably say.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's really good advice. Because nothing happens over, which is every saying every overnight success had many years, right?
Oh, many sleepless nights. Yeah. Oh yeah, and it never gets easier. It'll always require more. A business is never done because it is a living thing, and it always will want more. And it always wants to grow. And so it will never, ever, ever, until it's a position where you're able to offload it, it'll never be a passive thing. Because the tax man's always going to want more money, and people are always going to need to get paid better, and the market's always going to need more money. And it just never changes, it always changes. So it's just a different lifestyle. It's no better nor worse than having a job or being a freelancer or anything you want to do. It's just its own thing, but it's the one luxury you don't have: great risk, great reward. You're risking your mental freeness. You're risking your mental capacity outside of work, because your business, for me, this has been my experience, and many people, pretty much everyone I know who owns business, the more available you are to it, the more you let it, because you're going to be the life of your business. If it's truly your business, you are connected to it, and everyone in it's so important. But if if you're there, it's going to require so much. So you don't have the luxury of letting it go sometimes. Just that's something everyone should understand if they're going to try to make a business.
So Nick, I just want you to tell everyone where they can find you and find Mama Sauce online.
Yeah, sure. If you're interested in design inspiration and print inspiration, you should follow Mama Sauce at MAMASSAUCE, Mama with one M and two A's, Mama's Sauce, one word. And you can find us at Instagram and Facebook, and all of those places. Our website, mamas-sauce.com, has a print thing where you can just go and just browse printing and see great designers and great printing and get a ballpark idea of how much these things cost to print, which is pretty cool. It's just we try to build something that's like an inspiration, site where you can go find good print inspiration. That's where you can find that stuff. I would suggest following that stuff over me. I mean, if you follow me, you're going to see pictures of my cat, my special lady, and my garden. And if you're into those things, you feel free to find Nick Sambrato too. But Mama Sauce is where we do those things. We'll be at Adobe Max this year doing a workshop. We'll be doing a lot of events at Mama Sauce if you're local. We're going to start doing more events. We're learning a lot about that stuff. But yeah, that's where you can find us at those spots.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick, for sharing your story with us today. It's been wonderful learning more about your heritage, tradition, and culture. To learn more about Nick, visit nicksambrato.com and follow him on Twitter and Instagram at nicksambrato. Please visit hipbydesign.com/11 to watch today's episode, video recording, show notes, and extras. I want to encourage you to listen positively because when people talk about their culture, it usually involves intimate aspects of their life. It's an honor to be invited into their safe space, and it becomes your responsibility to protect and uphold the integrity of their stories. I'd love to thank you for joining. Remember, your normal is weird to people who don't understand you, but your weird is what makes you special. So embrace your weird and spread to others the love and acceptance you want to gain. Until next time, I'm your host, Hiba, and you've been listening to By Design. That was awesome, Nick.
Thanks, Hiba. It was awesome. Thank you so much for giving me just a place to be and hang out on a Saturday and talk about things I like to talk about.
I mean, man, I knew you were passionate, but you're passionate.
That's your nice way of saying, man, I knew you were weird, but you are weird.
No, for real. Like, just the way you tell your story is really nice. I was very touched about you talking about your mom because I'm a mommy myself. I hope one day my kid would talk about me like that. Not with food because I'm best, but
well, she's I get a little choked up. It's she's a special woman.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that your children talk that way about you because you will love them dearly. Yeah,
we'll see. I'm gonna give them a few years. We have a few people in the chat room. Thank you, Dylan York, and thank you, Anna Christina, for being here. There's a little bit more people watching, but I won't know that you're here unless you leave a comment in the chat room. So Christina wants to tell you that she just recently moved to New York from Orlando, and she's helping coordinate the Create Upstate, which is happening next weekend. And she's so sad Mama Sauce can't make it.
Oh yeah, that's right. Create Upstate was something we really wanted to do, and it just didn't work out timing wise for us this year. I would love to come up and just hang out, even if I had the time this year. But next year, can I come? That'd be awesome. Yeah, I'm way into that. So thanks for saying hi.
Yeah, and then we're hosting kind of small little giveaway. This is my sauce coaster. It's a little bit more up than what it looks like because I use it all the time. But you are generous enough to be giving away a pack of 3 of those. One pack that has 3 of them to a lucky listener, and
we'll put a Mama Sauce pin in there too. We just got some pins coming. We should put a Mama Sauce pin.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Sure. So for one lucky winner, I would love it if you pick the number between 1 and 2. And that would be great.
2.
Anna Christina, you just won. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Nick, so much for being here. This was a great story. How does it make you a little bit like reflect when you talk about your culture and your heritage and where
yeah, absolutely. And it forces you to kind of reprocess it, and it's amazing to hear about other people's cultures, and I don't know, these are the kind of conversations I love to have. So you got to keep doing this and keep forcing people to be weird, and let their weird come out because the world needs it. It's like a democracy of weirdness if we do that. Just put it all in the universe. And I think it's a beautiful thing that you're having a platform to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the whole goal of this. Like, I want people to feel free to talk about their selves and where they're from, and talk about the different quirky things that their traditions and customs, are all about. So it's very important for me that and then not only talk about, but go search, like go learn about your background. A lot of people that I've interviewed actually had to go talk to their parents, like, tell me more about me and where I'm and who I am. And then all of a sudden you have your eyes open to a whole new world. It's so weird. You make relationships. All of a sudden you're talking to your mom all the time, and your grandparents. I don't know. You want to now go visit places you've never been before. So that's basically what I hope for people to do.
Yeah, the 2 life pro tips when it comes to that. One, with my family, I try to treat my family now, besides when I have a really, like my mom, we can just talk, but like the family, like maybe it's hard to like have a conversation or whatever. I treat it like an interactive documentary. When I sit down, I'm like, let's go down. I want to find out. I'm here to discover, which is just super cool. Like asking people about themselves, especially when it's about your story. And 2, man, if you go down to your local LDS, Latter-day Saints church, and they have a family center, they'll sit with you for hours and go through all your ancestry records and put together like how your family got to America. I've got like I've got like the captain's log with my, my grandfather's entry point where he was a stowaway on a ship. They'll do all that stuff for you. So that's a really cool place to go and check out.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Nick, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. If you need to contact Nick, he's always been super and very open to talking to anyone. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.